My name's Craig Sharp. My company's called Abussi. That's nothing to do with Chris Abussi, but I am Chris Abussi's Twitter stalker. I'd just like to follow him on Twitter and see what he's up to. The purpose of talking today about cloud computing is really to hopefully, as was mentioned, evangelise about the subject and to show that really for particularly smaller businesses, and my definition of smaller is anywhere between 2 and 20 people, that really there's an opportunity here for you to use some services which in the past, very recent past, would have cost many thousands and thousands of pounds to implement for your business, and which now can be taken for a few pounds per month. The thing that I want to try to do is get across some key touchstones during the presentation. So we'll start with a little bit of history, because I can only really talk about why cloud computing is so different and innovative if we have a little understanding of how it used to be. We'll also talk about whether perhaps we've come full circle and why the cloud offers these benefits that I'm talking about. Then we'll talk about an overview of what cloud services are. Maybe you're using it at the moment without even knowing about it. That's always an interesting conversation to have with people who say, I don't trust this cloud thing, and then when you dig a little deeper, you find they're probably using 2 or 3 services they didn't know were cloud-based. I'll pick on 2 or 3 specific areas where, for businesses, smaller businesses, the benefits of using cloud can really be shown, and that's in storing your files, managing your email, and using the telephone. The latter one might be a bit odd, a bit unusual, but very, very beneficial. And then we'll talk about how using these cloud services can actually bring some change to your business, and I believe very, very positive changes too. I would encourage you at all points through the conversation, if there's any questions, don't wait till the end, just either shout them out or throw your hand up or whatever, and I'll either park them or deal with them at that point in time. Okay. So, the background. I'm not old enough to remember that, but I did a work experience in 1988 at Lucas's in Hall Green, and they had a special area at the back of the office, which was the computer area, and it had a special room that was argon gas protected with a mainframe or mini frame in the middle of the room. So I kind of have an understanding about that. John probably does remember it and probably worked on it.
Yeah.
But 40 years on, we've gone from very big, very expensive, very centralised computers, add 40 years to that, and what we've now got are effectively lots of very cheap, very inexpensive computer devices that are all talking to each other using this mysterious thing called the cloud. So there's been quite a huge amount of progression in 40 years. There was a famous phrase that some of you may be aware of, that a manager at IBM was once asked how many computers that he thought there was a market for computers. I think he said 5 in the world. And that was in something like 1949 or something, because they were so enormous and so expensive and so cumbersome and so difficult to look after that there was a perception that there'd only be a few of them and they'd do a very specific job. Now, I bet all of you have got a computer upon your person because it's called a smartphone. So that's just the basic entry level, and all of you will probably have a laptop or a computer at home, and we're now working towards smart devices that plug into the internet, home-based devices. You know, even the skybox that you've got is in part a computer. So we have actually moved forward quite a long way. But weirdly, you could argue that we've perhaps gone full circle, because back in these days, you used to use what's called a thin client. What it meant was all the computing power was centralised, and then your device simply took information from that central point and presented it to you. That's why you had these mainframe computers in large basements, and the rest of the building had VDUs or green screens that would present the information. We then went to what's called thick clients, which is where we're not talking about our own customers here, they're not thick clients, where all the computing power was done at your end and you just put stuff in the middle, like documents and data. And you could argue that with cloud computing, we've kind of gone back to the beginning, because things are largely stored in the middle, processing power occurs in the middle, and your device just gets sent bits of information it needs to know. So arguably we've gone full circle. I don't want you to read that, but effectively, if anyone wants to know why it's called the cloud, this explains it. And I have to say, when I was doing my research, this was new to me. It harkens back to days of network design, when a network design engineer's job was to make a detailed study of what was on the network: computers, printers, cables, switches, and they had a very detailed, very regimented view of how that network looked. But sometimes on their diagram they had to demonstrate how they would connect to other networks, or even the internet. But because they didn't know what that network looked like and couldn't give it the detail that their own network had, they just put a line to a fluffy cloud and said that links to another network, but I don't know what's at the end of that. And that's where the cloud comes from. So to show you what that might look like, that's what a proper network map looks like. So, you know, each individual machine is listed, and it's a computer or a switch, and it's got IP addresses and lots of very dull things. But on this diagram, stuff on the network disappears into the cloud, and that effectively is a representation of a network that we don't know about. We don't know enough detail about it.
Very angry.
It is quite angry, yeah. Normally they're slightly lighter blue and rather fluffier, but this one does appear to be rather angry. Maybe it hasn't got a lot to do because it's quite a small network. So the phrase cloud effectively means a place or a location where computers are, which I don't know that much about. I just know it exists, but I don't know much about it. And really, the previous slide, that's quite a complicated series of information to remember, and so I've simplified it. And that's my definition. The cloud is an IT service, or some software, or a hardware platform that you use, but which isn't located on your own premises.
What we used to call the computer bureau 40 years ago.
Yes, yes. You outsource computer services. This time you outsource it to an off-site location, in the same way that you off-site some of your accountancy services or other services, payroll services. But effectively, rather than have a lot of IT in your business, you use a service that lives in the cloud. And frankly, a lot of people don't care where that is. And if you were to ever find out what was at the end of that piece of cable, it would literally blow your mind. Some of the places where these data locations are stored are enormous. They're the size of football pitches and cost not just hundreds of millions of pounds, but billions of pounds. They are huge. But to you, it's just a service that you use and you pay a fee for. So maybe you're using some cloud services and don't even know it. So here are some services which are cloud services. Google. Some of them are obvious. Google, YouTube, Google Mail, Netflix, Hotmail, which has now become Outlook.com. Maybe that's less obvious. If anyone has recently purchased one of these BT home hubs that's got the phone that sits in that sort of slightly curved Wi-Fi base unit, all your calls go out over the internet. They don't actually go out over the telephone line it's plugged into. I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, but we'll talk more about that in a moment. But effectively, you're using a cloud phone system that lives in many different BT locations. You're not actually using the piece of copper that's installed to your house. The piece of copper is simply a transit mechanism for the broadband, which is the way in which your calls go out to the outside world. Anyone use all of these?
Apart from the BT.
Yeah.
Apart from
I wouldn't let them in my house if you think.
See, this has become very, very popular recently, and that's an entire revelation for most people. All of us in this room will remember the days that you would go to Blockbusters with your card and give them a card and give them 3 video cassette boxes and say, I'd like to rent those for 2 or 3 nights, please, and then you'd have to remember to take them back, or the cat would wee on them, or you'd lose them, or you'd forget to take them back and there'd be a fine. And now you just sit in the comfort of your own room, either with a smart telly or with a special app or on your laptop or your PC, and you have the entire world's movie collection at your disposal for a flat monthly fee. And effectively, that transition has taken probably less than 10 years and is made possible by the cloud, this thing that we talk about a lot but perhaps don't really realise what it is. And all it is going back to the previous slide, Netflix is simply an IT or software service that we use which is not located on our own premises. We no longer have a video cassette recorder that we have to put video cassettes into. We simply have an internet connection to the outside world, and all of the things we would have had equipment for on site has been positioned away from our premises, in this case our own homes. So if we take some business examples of how cloud services can be used, and this is where we turn it less from a general discussion and more about how you can actually use this in your own business. Let's take an example of file storage. Email comes later. Dropbox is a product that some of you may or may not be aware of. It's a very, very common product, and it is used to store all of the files that you would normally have on pen drives or disks or on your own computer. It is a cloud service because by the previous definition it is a service which is off-site from your premises. You don't have to put a piece of hardware on your computer network or in your home. And what it allows you to do is store files securely, share files with others. You have an unlimited undelete feature, which again come on to in a moment, real-time updating and no local hardware for £9 a month. Now, I want to put that into some sort of context. 5 years ago, John and I actually did a project, maybe a bit longer than 5, maybe 6, but not that long ago. If you wanted to store files securely on a company premises just 6 years ago, you had to buy a local server. You had to buy specific software, and you had to buy tape drives and other backup mechanisms to make sure it worked. And you then had to give somebody the responsibility every night of going into the cupboard and taking the tape out and going and putting it in a fireproof safe, taking out the one for that night and putting it back in the machine. And when they went on holiday, they'd forget, which meant there wasn't a backup done for a week. Now, all of that equipment 6 years ago would have cost an average 10 to 15 user business probably 10 to 15,000 pounds by the time it had been purchased and installed and software had been done and all the extras had been added on. But now you can have it for either free or £9 a month. So in 6 years, a facility has been created using the cloud, which means a business doesn't have to spend £10,000 to £15,000. It just spends £9 a month. The free bit, by the way, is that you can store up to 2 gigabytes worth of data in Dropbox for free. So if your need to store data is relatively modest, you can have a free account. There's quite a jump actually. If you then have a need for more than 2 gigabytes, you pay £9 a month and you can store 100 gigabytes. That's a lot. That's like every photo you've ever taken, ever, times 10. So, I'm trying to get across this point. Sorry. Hello. Please come in. I'm trying to get across this point that although the media is full of stories about how the cloud is going to ruin your life, about how the cloud will expose naked photos of you, the key thing, of course, to remember about that is if you don't take naked photos of yourself, there are none to be exposed. There's a little trick for politicians and others. Don't take them in the first place.
Or send it to somebody.
Don't take pictures of yourself naked. You can't have naked pictures of yourself exposed on the internet. There's a rule we should all live by. So what I'm trying to get across is this thing that perhaps has been put across in the media as a thing that's going to ruin your life or expose you to risk or whatever, has actually allowed businesses to take something, okay, as relatively mundane as storing files from a £10,000 to £15,000 solution 6 years ago to a £9 a month solution now. Now, whichever way you dress that up, That's not a bad thing. That's a brilliant thing. There are other benefits as well. This one, which I sort of skipped over, you would be amazed how often we use this within our business for our clients. Back in the day, let's go back 6 years ago to our solution where we have a server in a cupboard and Mildred has gone in to take the tape out and put it in the safe and then take the following day out and put it in there. You'd get a call from somebody and they'd say, oh, I've lost the file, I've deleted it. So you'd have to phone up Mildred and go, can you go and get yesterday's tape out of the cupboard and put it in? And then you'd find out that it must have been deleted more than a day ago because it's not on yesterday's tape, and you'd keep going back. But most people only ever had 7 tapes, or 5 tapes, Monday to Friday. So if somebody found out they deleted something more than 5 days ago, it was gone. Dropbox has a facility where you have unlimited undelete. So if you delete something, you can go back to it 6 months later and recover it again. That's really useful.
Great. Is that an automatic one? Do you have to set that?
Just does it automatically, yeah. So if you go into your folder, and notice something's missing, you can right-click and choose a function which then shows you everything that's ever been undeleted,
Okay.
and you can say, I want to recover that, I want to recover that, I want to recover that, and then it reappears again.
Right.
There's even a slightly more in-depth version, which is unlimited versioning, and that's a technical term for, if you are a solicitor and you create a legal document and it's version 1, and then over the next couple of weeks you change it, so you end up with 15 different versions, within Dropbox you can go back to version 4 and say, actually I thought version 4 was better, so I'll recover version 4, rather than keep the version 15. And you can go to any of the versions, so every time you hit save, effectively it's saving another copy which you can go back to in the future.
So I had an occasion where I shared a folder with somebody and their machine got corrupted with a virus.
Yeah.
So unfortunately that folder got corrupted as well.
So if that had been shared within Dropbox,
Which was in Dropbox, yeah.
it was. Oh, okay. And,
So
and
go-
did you undelete and did you recover the data?
No, we just, because every file there was corrupted,
Okay.
so I either had to go back sometime prior to the virus stuff.
But those functions are available.
Oh, okay.
So you could have gone to previous versions.
I'll have a look.
So it might be worth going back and see
Yeah.
if that folder still exists. You should be able to recover previous uncorrupted versions.
The folder still exists, but it's just that no file we deleted all the files.
Oh, I
Make sure
see.
it doesn't corrupt anything else.
Well, worth knowing for the future. Yeah, you can undelete and recover different versions.
You could undelete your property once.
The last thing I want. Go previous way back.
Before those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's ways of getting around it. Now, the reason I mention this is storing files is the dullest thing in the world. It really is. I work in IT. It's the dullest thing in the world. The thing is, it's equally at the same time the most important thing in the world. Because most businesses live and die by the fact that they've got access to their information. Now, whether you agree or disagree that you keep your accounts on an Excel spreadsheet and keep lists of important financial information in Word documents and whatever, it doesn't matter how you store your data. The fact that that data exists means you have to really keep hold of it. And if you can't tell who owes you money on a particular day or month, and if you've lost the name of that important customer that called you a week ago to give you a new opportunity, then your business is as good as dead. So although it is the dullest thing in the world, being able to have your data stored securely, be able to undelete it, and have it updated in real time. So going back to the idea of changing tapes, Mildred hasn't got to go and get tapes out and put them in a computer and then swap the tapes and put them back. Mildred can just go home at the end of the day because it's going to be done automatically. In fact, it's not even done in a timed manner at 7 o'clock at night like older services used to. Every time you change a file, it automatically updates. Yes?
What about ransomware, this virus which goes around, which encrypts your computer,
Yeah.
and then people go pay up,
Crypto locker, it's called.
Crypto locker. So if you've got this facility and you're a subscriber to Dropbox and you're paying your £9 a month, is that sort of, can you go, well, we just have to reinstall, we've wiped the machine, reinstalled the hardware, and we were able to get back to where we were the day before? Or
Last Friday, one of our customers called us up to advise that they got what they believed to be a crypto locker virus, we'll just call it a virus, on their machine. and actually Dropbox recovered all of the files prior to them being encrypted and corrupted. So
There's no way
actually,
you can sort of leap up the pipe and get to the Dropbox files and start encrypting those then.
well, the weird thing is that even though in this particular instance it had affected files that were in their Dropbox, we simply stopped the synchronization process, went back to previous versions, restored those after we'd cleaned the infection, and everything was fine. So the process took a couple of hours, but if that had been a normal situation, that could have taken days to fix, because you'd have had to reinstall everything, wipe everything. You know, it would have been a real nightmare. So in that case, Dropbox has got us out of a bit of a hole, and one that saved us time as the people paid to fix it, and it saved the client a lot of hassle because they're back up and running and operational again very, very quickly. So in that instance, that really does help in making sure that you can have a reliable and secure way of accessing files. Now, if you just see that in isolation as a way of storing information on your particular systems, that's great. But what it then does, and this is where the cloud comes into play, it opens up opportunities for you to do things that you couldn't do before. So here's an example. Let's go back to, I don't know, I'm kind of metaphorically walking over here because this is where my metaphorical communications cabinet is containing my server. So 6 years ago, I'd have installed a server and it'd be in my metaphorical communications cabinet, and it would have lots of flashy lights and disks, and all the computers in the business were connected to it and accessing all of my Excel spreadsheets and Word documents. Brilliant. And then I leave the office and then I go and see a customer at their office. The problem is all my data, all my Word documents, all my Excel spreadsheets are all inside this communications cabinet inside my office. And when I'm sat at my customer's office, I can't get to them. Now again, I'm making this oversimplified. There are ways in which you can use connectivity to get to the information, or you could have put it on a pen drive and take it with you and all that kind of stuff. The problem with taking data with you is you instantly create two versions of it. There's a version that stays at the office, and there's a version on your pen drive. And I guarantee you at some point you'll not work out which is the most up to date, because it will stay on the pen drive for days or weeks, and then you'll look at it and go, is that the one that I did with the bloke, or is that that one? Or anyway, it gets really confusing, and often I've seen people overwrite old data with new data and vice versa. It gets very complicated. So what you really want to try and do is not let the information leave your office, but still have access to it. So what Dropbox does is Dropbox creates local copies of everything everywhere, but keeps them all synchronized. And it does it automatically, and it does it without you having to think about it. So if you use Dropbox, and all your data in your metaphorical communications cupboard is linked into Dropbox, it disappears up into the cloud, where a copy is kept. And anywhere else you decide to work that's internet connected will always have a current version of that document available to you, not just on a laptop, but on an iPhone or an iPad or whatever other computer-based device that you've got. So one way that I use it quite a lot is because I do the account management for my customers. They will invariably, when I visit, say, oh, we can't find a copy of that invoice we had from you last week or last month or whenever. Well, on my iPad, I can quickly find all the invoices for that customer, identify the one that they're missing, and I can send them a copy of it whilst I'm sat in front of them. Now that's quite useful as well, because we've all been in a situation where you visit a customer and they request information, and 5 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, you get back to the office and you forgot. Got so many other things going on, you forget that George asked you if he could have a copy of that invoice he sent you the other day, that you sent him. So not only have we fulfilled an obligation with Dropbox to make sure that our files which are in our office are securely available and backed up, we've also created a new possibility, which is the ability to then access that information from anywhere else at any time and keep it up to date. Before I move on, one final example which also proves the benefit of this. I know company directors who go and give presentations, And invariably, they only finish half of the presentation before they're on the train going down to London to give the presentation. And I know a couple of people who come in on a Monday morning and give their presentation to a PA or a secretary and say, could you just tidy that up for me? Well, they do. And they tidy it up on their computer that's connected to this Dropbox. And by the time the person who gave it to them has arrived in London, roughly an hour and a half or 2 hours later, when they turn on their laptop and their laptop synchronises, the presentation's up to date and ready. So they've kind of gained 2 hours worth of additional preparation time by giving it to somebody that's still back at the office. And that's very clever as well.
Question.
Yes?
Where's free end of £9 a month start?
2 gigabytes worth of data
2 gig.
you can have for free, and if you go
What?
2.5, you have to pay £9 a month. And then that goes all the way up to 100.
There are other services that give you more than 2 gig.
Yes, I mean there are lots of services. There's Google Drive, there's various other things. Specifically, I'll just talk about Dropbox. But yeah, there are lots of other similar products out on the market, and I would always recommend that you choose one that works for you. However, my personal preference is Dropbox.
I think you also give a 500 gigabytes or 500 megabytes every time you invite somebody.
Yes, if you invite a friend, then they give you a little bit of extra for free. So I know people that have taken a 2 gigabyte free account, and after inviting 10 or 20 friends, have ended up with 16 or 17 gigabytes. So you know you can do it that way. But in all honesty, I know from a personal point of view it's different, but from a business point of view, you know, £9 a month is not very much, is it really? So the other benefit, which we do a lot of with our clients, and which is the one that I said at the beginning might seem a little bit weird, is telephones. Now this, I think, is even more extraordinary, and the opportunities it presents, I think, are even more interesting. So we work with a company who are called Gradwell. They're one of the UK's leading telephony providers. They've been doing it for years, hosted telephony providers, not traditional telephone providers. So let's go back. We're going to pick up our virtual comms room here. We're going to throw it out the window. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to install a telephone system 6 or 7 years ago. Okay. So what we would have next to the comms room that was there, but we throw it out the window, you would have a black box that you'd screw to the wall, and we'll all have seen them. We've probably still got them in our offices, many people have. So there'll be a black box on the wall, maybe with a BT logo, maybe something else. They used to be called all sorts of different fancy names. Sometimes they would tick if you were standing next to them, as little relays would move and make phone calls work. And then next to that, there'd be some BT telephone lines that had been installed, and there'd be a cable that ran from the telephone line into the phone system, and that would all kind of make it work. Brilliant. But it's the same principle as our comms room, because what you've got there is a telephone system that's screwed to the wall, and pieces of cable that run around your office building, ground level, first floor, second floor, and all the phones on the desks have got cables in the back of them, and they all link to this box downstairs, which itself links to telephone lines that go off to BT. What happens if you're a forward-thinking company owner and you want to work from home for a day? Well, you can, because you can use your mobile phone. But then it gets really expensive, because calls that are coming in for you at your office have to be transferred out to your mobile number. And if you're calling people from home on your mobile, it just looks a bit odd. It's always nice, I think, if you're calling somebody from your business, that the number that presents to the called party matches up with your business. I just think that looks nice. Well, you could do this 6 years ago, where you would be able to sort of spread your phone system around to different locations, but it was really, really expensive. We did it for a company 7 years ago. Their phone system cost £9,000, and the bits added on to make a guy be able to work from home and have effectively be part of the same phone system cost another £2,000. So now what you can do is, you don't have a phone system screwed to the wall, you have a phone system up there in the cloud. And it's got all of the functions, often more than the one that used to be screwed to the wall. So you can have different extensions, you can have voicemail for people, you can have things where if it doesn't answer on a certain phone, it'll bounce to another one, and what they call hunt groups, so it rings around the office till someone answers it. You can have it only ring in the office between daylight hours and then it goes to night mode automatically. All those kind of services, which were very expensive on the screw to the wall box, are now available in the cloud for £25 a month. Now, it allows you to then connect lots of different locations. So for example, we have a client who's an estate agent in Birmingham, and they have 3 separate offices, but they all share the same phone system. So you could be a particular extension in a particular office, but it doesn't matter, because if somebody answers a phone in one office and they say, can I speak to Joe Bloggs? They'll say, oh, he's in our other office, I'll just transfer you. Now, just that ability to transfer a call to another office 6 or 7 years ago was either A, technically difficult, or B, so prohibitively expensive you would have said, I'm very sorry, he's in our other office. Can I give you the number for our other office? And then I'll have to hang up and you'll have to redial a number. And that doesn't sound very nice when you're potentially talking to a new customer on the end of the phone. So by using a phone system which is hosted, which lives in the cloud, you can effectively have a very feature-rich, what would have been very expensive phone system spread across multiple locations for a very inexpensive amount. So the estate agent that we have in Birmingham on 3 sites, they've used this system for a number of years. We've recently installed a phone system for another customer in Birmingham. They've effectively got a large office with 12 people, but then they have 2 satellite workers. And again, those 2 satellite workers can be communicated with at any point. And the other benefit is that anybody who's on this phone system, regardless of their geographical location, if you phone between sites, it's all free. So the calls between your geographical locations are free. The calls that you make to outside locations, so when you dial normal numbers, are at a reduced price. And most of the companies that provide these kind of services do very cost-effective bundles. So one of the bundles, for example, is you can buy a bulk of 500 call minutes to UK mobiles for, I think it's £25. And we calculated if you actually made 500 minutes worth of calls to mobiles at normal rates, it would cost you about £55. So you're kind of getting half price on the calls. So not only are you getting a service which is allowing you to do things that you might not have done before at a price which you probably wouldn't have even thought was a possibility, but you're also then saving money on the calls that you make using that service.
Sometimes, you get phone calls from people and they sense they're using some sort of IP system and it's not very good. Is there any sort of degradation in the call quality with this sort of system?
If you speak to anybody who is using an IP or hosted phone system and the call quality is poor, it's because it's been poorly implemented and it's because it's on a poor quality internet connection. Now there's a lot of IT companies out there, we're not one of them, who have jumped on the IP hosted telephony bandwagon because the opportunity for them to sell lots of hardware and computers and servers and what we call tin, pushing bits of tin at people, is diminishing month on month. So they're scrambling around looking for new opportunities to get people to buy stuff. And a lot of IT companies look at this kind of telephony thing and go, well, it's kind of a computer and it kind of does computery things. It can't be that difficult for us to learn how to do that. And so they jump in and install some stuff and invariably disappoint the client. We've been doing this kind of stuff for about 10 years, almost as long as it was available. Up till 4 years ago, it wasn't really the kind of thing I would have ever recommended to a customer because the technology just wasn't mature enough. So for the first 6 years, it was a little pet project of mine. But the company that we just installed in Birmingham, they, in the first 2 weeks of their use, are averaging 160 calls a day. There's only 12 people. So they're doing 160 calls a day, and I am not getting phone calls from them saying, this call quality is rubbish. I've just called a bloke, he couldn't hear me. I've just called a bloke, he told me I sounded like I was in a tunnel, which are the usual issues. And that's because the way that we've deployed it is right and correct. Some people will try to share an existing broadband line with their computers and their phones, and that's the first mistake. So if you're going to have a phone system like this, you're best to have a dedicated broadband line for your phone system and a dedicated broadband for your computers. And when you think about it, the cost of a broadband line is what, 30, 40 quid? Even an expensive one's 30, 40 quid, you can get them cheaper. So to have two broadband lines may sound full of largesse, but actually it's a relatively cost-effective way to solve the problem. There is an asterisk here. I'm purposefully not trying to avoid it, but effectively, if you want to pay as little as £25 a month for that sort of service, then you use what are called software phones, which I actually have on my laptop, and I'll show you at the end. So you open a piece of software, and you just use a little headset on your computer, and that's free. Software is free. You can buy proper desk phones that just look like a normal phone with a display and a handset and numbers and all that kind of stuff, and they start from about £60 each. So if there was 10 of you in an office and you wanted to employ this kind of system, then it would cost you about £25 a month, but you would have to then pay £600 as a one-off cost just to get your handsets, or nothing if all of you decided that you were happy with using the software and a headset on your computer.
Does it matter to the location, whether it's, I'm guessing UK, whether it's abroad or what?
Expand on that a bit more.
Say, for example, if you have offices in abroad in North America or...
Oh no, not at all, no. No, I mean, we haven't done any ourselves, but we know partners of Gradwell who have done this, which is connect up 2 or 3 different offices globally. So they've had a London office, a New York office, and where was the other one? Oh, Sydney, Australia. So
Over the
yeah,
globe.
yeah.
So do they need Gradwell software on each location?
No. Effectively, the phone system still lives in this country in the cloud, in what's called a data centre. But the people in Sydney, the people in London, the people in New York all just connect to it. So that's all they need.
So they can only need a laptop.
All they need is a laptop, yeah. And to be honest, depending on where you go, because as I'll come on to in a minute, a lot of this all depends on the nature of the internet connection that you've got. But a lot of these services now can be run on your laptop in public Wi-Fi areas, so places like Starbucks or Costa's or places you go where they offer free Wi-Fi. A lot of them are good enough now for you to be able to make calls whilst you're sitting, you know, having a latte or having a rest between meetings, which will bring us on to the sort of efficiency elements I'll talk about in a moment.
So does it compete with Skype?
It does compete with Skype. The difference that you have with Skype is firstly a perception issue. So most people, when you talk about Skype, think of you videoing with your granny in Australia, or granny here Skyping with her nephew in Australia, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a perception issue. The second downside of it is that there aren't really a lot of professional looking handsets that you can use with Skype. You have to use a computer. And there are a lot of people out there, who really prefer to have a proper desk phone on their desk. So the company we've just done a phone system for in Birmingham, they had 12 new handsets, and then they also had headsets to go with the handsets rather than headsets to go with the computer, if that makes sense. So they made it look like a traditional phone system, but the underlying technology is this. So using, what I'm drawing us towards is using the kind of cloud services that I'm describing offers new ways of working. I'd much rather do that, I don't look as pretty as that, but anyway, I'd much rather be doing that than that. Now, maybe some of us in the room don't stand on the platform on Shirley or Solihull station waiting for a train to Birmingham, but there's a lot of people in the world who do have to commute a long way to go to work. When I do go to London on the train, I see people who commute from Coventry and Milton Keynes into London every day. And it may be that they have to. There are jobs where you can't do it remotely. Surgery, for example. You can't be a surgeon remotely.
Well, they are.
Chef, for example, I can't cook food remotely. So there'll always be positions and jobs where you can't use remote cloud services. But as we are becoming much more of a knowledge-based economy, and where we're exchanging information and data between each other rather than physical manual jobs, much as we all, including myself, I'm disappointed we don't make stuff anymore. The fact is that we shift information around, and if you can do that without having to get on a train and go to a place where the information lives, if you can do it from your home, let the information come to you, surely that's got to be a good thing. And sorry, I trod over what you were going to say a moment ago. You were going to ask.
No, that's perfect.
On this telephone thing, a lot of business, traditional business works 9 to 5,
Yeah.
be a florist or whatever the business is, but a lot of smaller businesses are missing out on sales because at 5 o'clock they go home, people surfing the internet, are looking at websites and thinking, just be nice to make a phone check on the quality, check on something to do with this order, and so call centres are picking up business, which the smaller business is saying, well, I can't work, you know, I don't divert the office, the phone. Is this a way of diverting the phone to your
Yeah,
home?
it is, yeah. Well, in that specific instance, there are a couple of different ways that you can deal with that. The first one is that the phone system can automatically be programmed so that at a given time, let's say 5:30, the phones stop ringing in the office, or florist, or wherever, and start ringing in a different location. Now that could just be a mobile, or it could be another home number, or it could be anywhere you like. So that's firstly an automatic thing, so you don't have to remember to lift the handset before you leave and press hash and then enter the number you want to forward it to and then listen for the beep and then put the phone down, all that rubbish. Second thing is, any messages which are taken as voicemails out of hours are emailed to you as a sound file. So rather than have to go home, wake up in the morning, go back to the office, look at the voicemail machine sat on the shelf and it's bleeping with number 5, there's 5 calls I've missed. Those 5 calls would have come in, a voicemail would have been announced, sorry our florist is closed, if you'd like to leave a message we'll deal with it as soon as possible. And the person's message is emailed to you, so let's say 7:25 in the evening, your phone goes beep, beep, and you look at it, and you can actually listen to the voicemail message that they left, and if you wanted to act upon it there and then you could, because the message tells you what time they rang, how long their voicemail message lasts, and the number that they rang from, so you can instantly call them back. Now that's useful during the day as well. A lot of our clients who use this are out and about all the time, so if they miss a call, they can listen to it whilst they're at the office and respond, and you don't have that problem of, I've been out for 4 hours, invariably when I get back to the office, I'm going to have a load of voicemails I've got to listen to, I've got a load of this, that and the other. So it's about using your time more efficiently. So if you can deal with 1 or 2 voicemail messages during that 4-hour period, rather than have to deal with it all when you get back, it just makes life a bit more efficient. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more you can do with it as well. So there's a feature that allows you to route certain calls from certain predefined callers to certain places. So it's kind of like a VIP system. So if one of your very best customers was calling in from a number that you know, you could have set it up so it frankly just rings everywhere so someone's going to pick it up. If it's somebody equally you don't want to talk to, you can send it straight to voicemail or just close it down. So ultimately, the ability to work in different ways is really only possible if you use cloud services. Because if you go back to our communications room with servers and computers connected to it, what you're effectively doing is locking your business infrastructure into your office and making it completely unavailable to you outside of the office. Yes, that's oversimplified, but the mechanisms by which you could make that work to give you access while you're away are quite complicated and a little bit flaky. So by being able to use cloud services, it can change the way that you do business, and it can change the way that you can hopefully interact with your customers. It also comes back to our flexible ways of working, which I mentioned about coffee houses and public Wi-Fi and all that sort of stuff, because there's a lot of people now who will take documentation with them on things like tablets and have it signed on the tablet there and then, and that is the electronic version of that transaction. You don't have to print out a piece of paper at the office, remember to take it with you, put it in your folder, get it out at the other end, get them to sign it, put it back in the folder, take it back to the office, scan it, or whatever you've got to do with it. It's just available. So, talking about efficiencies, if you're a salesperson and you go and see 5 clients over the course of a week, most salespeople don't actually go back to the office very regularly because the patch that they cover is usually geographically very, very large. So back in the day, you would then have to go back to the office to give them the pieces of paper that you got signed, and that was a bit of a chore, and it meant that if you signed them on a Monday and you didn't go to the office on a Friday, that was 4 days where that order wasn't being processed. If you've got your form on a tablet and they sign it, and that's an electronic version of the order, that is effectively back at the office instantaneously. Work is being done on that order, documents being produced to get them to fill in the bank details, all that kind of stuff. So efficiencies are gained by having information in the cloud. I've already mentioned Starbucks and Costas. I know my local Starbucks and Costas doesn't look quite like that, but when you're searching Google Images for pictures, you are, well, pick what the first thing you can find, otherwise you'll be there all day. But you can stop for refreshment during your working day, but still have access to things, thus increasing efficiency. And this is just a picture of kind of people looking happy and smiley and doing stuff outside. You're no longer limited to doing your business in a very formal, rigid location. You can effectively do business anywhere. So, business agility using the cloud, and to kind of summarise what it is that we've talked about today, you'd like to hope that it's a clear progression of, if you begin to use the cloud, it reduces the IT burden that you have to have in your own office. So recapping on what would have been the case merely just 5 years ago, you would have had to put expensive equipment into your premises that would have had a capital outlay and which would have required professional people to look after. So by not having that IT in your business, you are increasing your business's reliability. Computer equipment is brilliant for the first 12 months when you buy it, big servers and all the rest of it, most efficient. That's the most, just for your reference, that's when your IT support company earns their most amount of money, is the first 12 to 18 months. Because they've charged you to put it in, they then charge you to manage and maintain it, but because it's brand new, nothing goes wrong in the first 18 months, so you're effectively paying them to do nothing. So their maximum income level is the first 18 months of any IT support contract following a new deployment. But if you've got increased reliability because there's less equipment in your business, then hopefully you can also benefit from improved flexibility. And by that I mean, I can work anywhere, I can work from home, I can take data to my client premises and deal with it there rather than have to take bits of paper. If you then have that improved flexibility, you hopefully can then provide a faster response. And that comes back simply to the florist question earlier. It may be that a faster response is if you'd have popped around the corner to buy a sandwich or go and visit a customer over lunchtime and you missed that vital call that came in, well, that's lost. But if you have the phone system that means that that voicemail is sent to you as an email, so while you're standing in the pret-a-manger queue, you can go, oh, a voicemail, what that is. Oh, bloody hell, I better phone them back. Within 2 or 3 minutes, you've responded to the call, whereas actually if it was lunchtime, it might have taken an hour, and in that hour they phoned 2 other people and you've lost the business. So hopefully that improves your response times, and all of this is leading to increased profit. Because if you're not spending £10,000 on IT hardware and X amount of pounds per month to have it looked after, and you are benefiting from increased reliability, so you're not phoning up your IT people going, I've deleted some data, I've lost some data, the server's failed, I've lost this. If you are working more flexibly, so you're not having to travel around all the time, delivering bits of paper and visiting people, if you are able to work more flexibly and more efficiently, and offering a faster response, thus capturing more data, more opportunities, it will always lead to increased profit. That's my take on it. And at that point, I see questions.
Is there an optimum apart from being faster? Is it, say, BT broadband to watch the it on TV, they need to get 2 megabytes per second. Are these